And so we're going to address this issue of, first of all, getting a Medicare card. And our first question, and by the way, this is where you really should begin taking notes if you're going to on notes, page 1. So the first question is, who is eligible for Medicare? Well, their answer is anyone 65 who has paid Medicare taxes for at least 40 quarters or whose spouse has done so. Now, if you're working for someone right now, 1.45% of every dollar that you're making is going to fund Medicare. Your employer is matching that. It is funding Medicare as well as Medicaid. If you're working for someone right now, you're putting 6.20% of every dollar you're making is going into Social Security. Again, your employer is matching that. If you're self-employed, you're putting that full amount in. We call those FICA taxes or self-employment taxes. All right, so all of us are funding Medicare and we're funding Social Security. And as long as we have at least 40 quarters, we're eligible to draw benefits through those systems. Now, most of you have many more than 40 quarters, but we have to have at least 40 quarters. Now, there are times when people do not have their own 40 quarters. My wife would be a perfect example of this. We've been married 31 years. We have 7 children. 5 of those are biological children born into our family and 2 that we adopted from the country of Uganda. It's like we started over. We have a 6- and 9-year-old. I'm 59. But the point is, 7 children, and my wife came to me when my oldest was 5 years old. And she said, you know, I've been thinking about the possibility of homeschooling our children. And she said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, I'm open to it. We knew some families that did that. I was not homeschooled. She certainly was not homeschooled. But I knew some things about my wife. Number 1, she's very smart. Number 2, she's very disciplined. And number 3, she did have an elementary education degree. So she really had an interest in teaching anyways. And we thought she'd go to school and teach. But she decided that our home would be her school. And so she taught our children, did very a good job at that. They've all done well academically. But there is one issue with a homeschooling mother. They don't make any money, right? There's no income in that. And so I have, for all these years, been the source of income for our family. And the point is, does my wife, though, have to worry about Medicare or Social Security? And the answer is no, she doesn't. Why? Because she'll be able to draw those benefits off of my work record. That's called a qualifying spouse. Now, there are some rules about qualifying spouses. I just want to mention a couple. Number 1, if you don't have your own 40 quarters and you're married to someone and you've been married for at least a year, you can actually draw benefits off that spouse's work record. Now, if you were married to someone and they died while you were married to them, and as long as the marriage lasted 9 months, you can draw benefits off their work record. Now, we all know that there are times when marriages end in divorce, but that marriage lasted 10 years. And you did not remarry prior to the age of 60, you can actually draw benefits from that previous spouse. Now, if you remarry prior to age 60, then that you cannot go back. It annuls it. What happens if you're married a second time, and if that marriage ends in divorce or death, then you can go back to the very first spouse. And so those are the rules of a qualifying spouse. And if you have further questions about that, we can take those at the end. But here's my point. Someone has to pay into that system 40 quarters, either you or a present or previous spouse. That's what allows us to be Medicare beneficiaries. Now, there's a second way in which people qualify for Medicare, and that is this. Anyone that is under the age of 65 who has been receiving disability benefits, which means they've been diagnosed with a physical disability or an emotional disability, and they're receiving disability benefits either from Social Security or the Railroad Retirement Board, and after those benefits have been paid to them for 24 months, on the 25th month, they automatically enrolled into Medicare, regardless of age. And this is why you'll meet people that are 42 or 57 or 59 or 62 that are on Medicare. They came into the Medicare system because of disability. I actually wrote my youngest disability person just recently, was 37 years old, on disability for 24 months. 25th month, they automatically qualified for Medicare. Now let's talk about who needs to actually enroll into Medicare. Well, for some of you, you will be automatically enrolled into Medicare. There's nothing at all that you have to do. So those turning 65 who are receiving a Social Security check or a Railroad Retirement Board check will be automatically enrolled. The government knows you're turning 65. They're assuming that because you're receiving retirement benefits, you do not have a work plan available to you. So that's why they mail you the card. Now, in this instance, your Medicare coverage begins the very first day of the month that you turn 65. Your birth month is when you're first eligible. Now, there is one exception to this, and that would be this. If you're born, let's say, on May 1st, they will move you to April 1st. They move you to the previous month if your birthday is on the first day of the month. But if it's on the second day thereafter, your Medicare coverage will always begin on your 65th birth month. All right? And so for those of you that are on Social Security, you're going to be automatically enrolled, and the Medicare card is going to show up approximately 100 days prior to when that Medicare is going to begin. All right? Nothing you have to do whatsoever. Now, it is not uncommon today for someone to be on Social Security. Therefore, about 3 months before that, the Medicare card shows up in the mail automatically. but they really don't want to start Medicare, at least not yet. So my question to you is this: why would someone not take Medicare when they are first eligible to do so? Anyone? Still working, right? You're working, or your spouse is working, and you're covered by an employer-provided plan that you like. You like the cost of the plan, you like the coverage of the plan, so frankly, you really are not too interested in Medicare, but the Medicare card's going to show up anyway if you're on Social Security. Well, Medicare knows this is going to happen, so they make provision for you, and they're going to allow you to amend your benefits. Now listen, if you're taking Social Security, you have to stay enrolled in Part A. But if we have a group plan of yours or your spouse's, you do not have to take Part B, at least not yet. And so the way you amend your benefits is this. You take the card, and you all saw the front side, that A and B card. Take the card, turn it over, and this is exactly what it looks like on the back side. And this is your opportunity to amend your Medicare benefits. So you would check the box, and you will sign it, and you'll notice it says, I do not want medical insurance. Remember, hospital Part B was called medical. So what you're saying is, I don't want Part B, because if you're going to be on Social Security, you have to have A. But we don't have to take B if we have a group plan of ours or our spouses. You'll check the box, you'll sign it, and you'll mail it back into CMS, which is called the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services. This is the agency that oversees the entire Medicare program. So when your card arrives in Baltimore, Maryland, they're going to amend your benefits. They're going to drop off the B, and they're going to send you a new card that says Hospital A only, or Part A only. And then you can pick up B whenever you lose the group plan. I'll explain how you can do that later in our workshop. Okay, so that's the way that you amend the benefits. But if you keep the card, what's going to happen? You're going to start paying for your medical, your Part B. Presently today, that's $144.60 a month. It's going to come right out of your Social Security check. So if you send the card back in, for most people, A is free. There'll be no cost for B. But if you keep the card, we're going to start paying for that. Now listen to me. If you do not have a group plan of you or your spouses, you're not going to send the card back in. You have to go on Medicare at 65 unless you have a group plan available to you. Everyone must do that. All right, so if we keep the card, we're going to start paying for B. If we send it back in, no B at this particular time, and we'll pick it up later. All right, so that's the way you can amend your benefits if that's necessary. Now, the second question I want to address is this one. Some of you are going to need to self-enroll. How do you do that? What's the process? You're turning 65, you're not receiving Social Security benefits or Railroad Retirement Board benefits, and basically what you have to do, if we're going to start Medicare at 65, you got to raise your hand and say, I'm ready to start my Medicare. Let me tell you who you are. Those of you that are going to have to self-enroll, not on Social Security, not on Railroad Retirement Board. It would be anyone today that is approaching 65 and you're covered by some kind of a retiree insurance. You or your spouses, either one. So if I'm approaching 65, I'm covered by a retiree plan, you have to take Medicare at 65. Now, you may keep the retiree plan. That may be in your best interest to do so. Sometimes not, sometimes yes. But if so, on a retiree plan, you've got to put Medicare in the first payer position, and you do that by enrolling into Medicare. Now, some of you right now are covered by COBRA insurance. The same thing applies to you. If you're approaching 65, covered by COBRA, you have to put Medicare in the first payer position. You must enroll into Medicare. Now, you may want to keep the COBRA plan. It may be or may not be in your best interest to do so, but if you're on COBRA, we've got to enroll in Medicare at 65. We have no other options. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about a couple who really made a terrible mistake not taking 65 when they were on COBRA. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But the point is, on COBRA, we're starting at 65. And then the last group of you would be those of you that are covered by Affordable Care Act plans. You went through the healthcare.gov system to be able to enroll in one of those individual plans. You too are going to want to start Medicare at 65. Because what happens if you were to keep that ACA plan, all the tax subsidies go away and all the cost sharing goes away. So there's no reason whatsoever that I know of to keep an ACA plan once you're Medicare eligible. All right? So the only people not going on Medicare at 65 are those that they or their spouse are working and covered by a group plan. Everyone else, we're going to start Medicare at 65. And if we're not receiving Social Security, we have to self-enroll to make that happen. I look forward to having you join me in the next video so that you can continue learning the ins and outs of Medicare. When you're ready for personalized advice for your situation, all you have to do is go to MedicareSchool.com in order to get in touch with us. When you get there, you'll be given the opportunity to schedule a time to talk with an Enlighten You Medicare consultant. This is a completely free service for you and there's no strings attached. We'd love to answer your questions and if it makes sense, help you choose and get enrolled in the best plans for your needs.